Good evening and pranams to all of you. In our last discussion, we used the analogy of a flying bird, and we also discussed those four forces that are needed for a bird to fly. The lift, that is basically the upward force, thrust, the forward force. We use this symbolism or representation, right? So the lift, thrust, the forward force, and the backward and the downward force, that is weight and drag. All of us undergo this kind of scenarios in our life. The four forces, right, in our life, always the play of four forces happen. The lift is basically the upward force we call viveka and vairagya, the clear discrimination and the relative dispassion. What is this discrimination? Discrimination is all about the nitya anitya vastu viveka. What is permanent in this world? What is not permanent in this world? This is the clear discrimination. What is prakriti? What is purusha? What are the ingredients in the prakriti? The clear understanding, including our body, mind, intellect, senses, the relationships, everything forms in the plane of prakriti. And anything that is born will last for some time and will go back to the prakriti. And what will last? That nitya anitya vastu vivek. That is the clear discrimination that one should have. In our daily life, we should have this clear discrimination and the relative dispassion. When I say relative dispassion, it is not running away or discarding things in life. It is all about what is permanent and what is not permanent. So where I have to give more attention to, this is the relative dispassion. So acquaintance with the permanent, this is the relative dispassion. So when we have the acquaintance with the permanent, we will start giving less attention to the impermanent in life. So the clear discrimination and relative dispassion, that will only rise one above those impulses and the objective pulls that come in our daily life. This is the lift, this is the upward force. And thrust is basically what? The thrust is basically the urge, so called as the mumukshutva, the longing for freedom, the longing for self-realization, longing for finding out the true meaning in life, longing for the ultimate goal in life, right? So that longing, the longing for freedom and self-realization, will keep an individual moving forward even in the difficulty. That is why it's called the forward force. Thrust is forward, lift is the upward force. So what is the aerodynamic principle? Lift and thrust should be more compared to weight and the drag. What is weight here? Weight is basically the past tendencies, all the habits, all the conditioning that happens in an individual. And those conditionings, those tendencies, those prarabdhams, those karma vasanas, those habits basically pulls down. That will make an impact in our journey in terms of adding slowness and our efforts to be too much. So this weight is the force, this is the counter force of a lift. So weight basically, weight is what? Weight is the tendencies, the habits, the conditionings that we have created, which makes the progress slow and also effortful. And drag is basically what? Drag is the backward force, so called as the ego or the wrong identification. What is the wrong identification? I am the doer. I am doing this. Out of my capability, things are happening. I am this body, mind, intellect, sense. I am this body. This deep rooted tendencies towards the object. So, what happens basically when we have this body, mind, intellect, sense complexes, we will also get addicted to the objects. And these objects will come into play and distort us. So when I say the wrong doership or the wrong identification, that I am the doership, I am the doer, I possess this, due to me these things happen. These all are the wrong identifications that one is creating in life. From where this wrong identification comes? From the influence of the Prakriti, from the influence of the objects. That includes our own body, our own mind, our own sense, our own intellect. That will oppose the movement. So how a bird flies, basically the upward and the forward force should be more. Similarly, for us to live in this life, we need to have these forward force and the upward force countering the downward and the backward force. See, one person boards a crowded train, and somehow that person gets the seat, and getting a seat in a crowded train is also something is a reliefful. And this person, after getting the seat, keeps the luggage on his head. So after some time, the co-passenger asks, "Hello sir, what are you doing? Why are you carrying this luggage on your head? Why can't you put it down?" So at that point, this man replies very honestly, "Oh, no, the train is already carrying my body weight. So I should not burden the train with my luggage also. That's why I am carrying this." So that's where Bhagavan says in the 3rd chapter, 27th verse, I think it's 27, yes. Prakrite kriyamanani gunei karmani sarvasya ahankara vimoodatma kartahamidi manyate. So the actions are performed by the gunas of the nature, but we all get deluded that I am the doer. So similarly, this man is also thinking that my poor train is already carrying my body weight. Let me help this train. So I should not burden the train with my luggage. But what is reality? Reality is the train only is carrying his weight and the luggage weight. And in life, most of the times we know what is favorable, what is unfavorable. What are the forces which are favoring in our life? What are the forces which are unfavoring in our life? In our last session we saw Duryodhana. Right? Duryodhana, in his conversation with Krishna, says that Janami dharmam najame pravarti, janami adharmam najame nivarti. Kena devena hridistidena yada niyuktosmi tada garomi. Hey Krishna, I know what is right, what is not right. I have a very good clarity on what is dharma, what is adharma. But my internal forces are not allowing me to do the dharma, though I know that dharma will only win. But my inward tendencies are not allowing. When we say Kenavi devena hridistidena yada niyuktosmi tada garomi, meaning my gunas, my tendencies, my vasanas. And that Lord who is sitting inside me is also triggering to do the adharma. I know what is dharma, what is adharma. But I don't want to do the dharma. I want to pursue the adharma. See, we also often know when we are doing something wrong. We know that this is wrong. But what happens at that point of time is basically the rajasic forces. Today we will see this very elaboratively. When we say the rajasic force, let's take desire, lust, anger. Desire and anger ultimately overpowers us. So here Bhagavan says, desire and anger are the eternal enemies. So when we say desire and anger, there is only one thing: desire. If desire is not fulfilled, we get anger. If desire is fulfilled, we get into lust, and further fulfillment if not happens, again the anger will come into picture. So there is only one thing, only desire. So desire, fulfillment or not fulfillment, ultimately leading to anger. So desire is the root. So here Arjuna also asked the same question. What is this question? What is that which hides the wisdom in all of us? Like in the last session we saw this, how the dust hides a mirror. This is the question Arjuna is also asking. If you see the verse 3, 3rd chapter, 36, let's see this. Arjuna uvaja adakkena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichannavi varshneya baladiva niyojita. So impelled by what, hey Krishna, does the Purusha, the man, commit papa, sin, even against his own wishes? So there is a force that is acting. So that's where even when we drive in a city, the red signal, the red color just appeared in front of you. From green to yellow to red, that transition happened. And we also know that when the red comes, we should not jump the signal. We know this is the truth, this is the reality, I should not. But what happens? What is the urge that is making us to compromise? Though we know what we are doing is wrong. Right? See, sometimes what happens is, we may feel that, we may assume that that's okay. One time is okay. Second time also we'll feel that, yeah, this time is also okay. See, we are driven to act in this kind of scenarios where we know our act is insulting to our knowledge and even social status. Please understand that getting a challan, getting a fine of 2,000 rupees is something that will touch our social status. And again, getting a challan, or caught by the traffic police, this is also insulting our knowledge and social status. So what is this terrible negative force? That's where here says the devil. What is that devil which is there in the man that impels the man to compromise with his wisdom and to commit this kind of sins? This is a universal question, right? If you see any religion, You can see this. What is this Rajasic force? What is this Rakshasic force, or maybe in Gita's language, Asurika Shakti or Asurika force? Different religions use different names. It is basically what? The desire. The negative force in all of us is basically the desire to act contrary to our own ideal. Desire for possessing things. Even signal jumping is what? Desire to reach on time, or desire to avoid frustrations, or you already we are late. On the top of that, I don't want to become further late. Maybe that is the desire here. So what happens actually when the desire is not fulfilled? We have seen this verse in second chapter. The padana krama, right? If you have seen this, you will be able to appreciate. Jayado vishayan pumsa sangasdesho vajayade sangat samjayade kamat kamat krodho vijayade krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibhramaha smriti bhramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat prashyati. So the padanakrama, dhyayado vishayan pumsa, the vishaya, the thinking about the vishaya, the vastu, basically the desire, right? From there. So that is where the desire, the urge to possess anything that you want, and that urge growing further becomes the lust to enjoy that object. And what happens when the lust is objected? If that, if there is an obstruction that is not allowing you to enjoy, that desire, passion will ultimately solidify as a anger, desham, ragadvesham. So here Gita's solution, that's what we are seeing now. The forward and upward force. Again, this the thrust and lift, the forward and upward force. How it comes? Those forces are basically the vivekam and the vairagya, the disciplinary living, viveka, vairagya buddhi. And how it happens? Through the bhakti and steady sadhana. That is where karma yogam becomes a very big avenue for all of us. So you may ask a question: should we live desireless in life? It is not like that. When we have this forward, upward forces through viveka, through disciplined life, with bhakti sadhana, with karma yogam as the main way of living, our aspirations can become stable. It will not be sporadic. That is the only thing which Gita is asking. Desires will come. It doesn't mean that somebody can have a desireless life. But those desires will be stable. It will not be sporadic. So with this understanding, what happens? Otherwise the weight and the drag, the downward force and the backward force will take control. So karma yogam is the way of living with the understanding of the forward and the upward force. At the same time, the downward and the backward pulling force. So karma yogam is the essence that we are talking now. Today will be concluding this chapter. What is karma yogam? Right actions and right duties with right understanding. And while we do the karma yogam, what happens? What is the implied benefit? The inner purity. What we are trying to do at the end of the day? The freedom. So that freedom will happen when we have the inner purity, when the mind is clear, when the mind is pure. And when we say the desirelessness state, it is all about watchfulness over our desires. watchfulness over our desires and the conscious choices that we make in life. When we say conscious choices, that includes the associations that we have in life, the influences that we have in life, including satsangam, including the right way of living. So Bhagavan says that when we go in this margam, the desire, lust, anger will not cloud our clarity of perception, will not harm the alertness of our judgment. So we all have this knowledge. There is nothing new here. But what happens is basically with the influence of these backward and the downward forces, we all fall into the trap of those forces. And it doesn't mean that lift and thrust is not there. Like in a mirror which is covered with the dust, the mirror is there. The only problem is dust has got covered. Or like in the fire which is covered by the smoke, fire is still there. So what happens is basically when these negative tendencies overpower, what happens is basically these positive forces will become dormant and these negative forces will become dominant. So what is the way? Way is to make the positive forces dominant in us for our growth. So that is where in the second chapter Bhagavan already mentioned about the sthitaprajna Lakshan, a person of steady wisdom. Now you will be able to appreciate at this point of time who is a sthitaprajna, who is a jnani, who is a muni, who is a jivan mukta. Prajahadi yada kaman sarvan parthamanogadan atmanyev atmanatushta sthitaprajna stadochyade. The sthitaprajna is a person who is a jnani, who is a knowledgeable person, whose mind is satisfied in the self alone. The mind is not positioned in the external world. The mind is positioned inside that person. Where is inside meaning? In the self. It's all about what sthitaprajna is. Atmanyev atmanatushta sthitaprajna stadochyade. The abidance in the self. So here the person is free from the binding desires. Atmani eva atmana tushta. Also, if you see the 56, I think, to second chapter 56. So, 56th verse is, Dukheshu anudignavana sukheshu vigadaspraha vidaraga bhayakrodha sthitadir muni ruchyate. Who is a muni? Who is a muni here? Muni is the same person, the sthitaprajna. The key aspect is Dukheshu anudignavana sukheshu vigadaspraha vita raga bhaya krodha sthitadir puniruchyate. Unaffected in sorrows, free from cravings in pleasure. Sukheshu vigadaspraha vita raga bhaya krodha. Free from the attachment, fear, anger. This is so called as in the modern world emotional stability. For emotional stability to happen, what is required? The self-knowledge is required. And in the next verse it says, Tasya prajna pradishtida. This is very important. That's why I am purposefully bringing this verse. You will see the hierarchy which is there within us. Tasya prajna pradishtida. This knowledge is very well established in the sthitaprajna. So, what happens when something goes wrong or something comes good? See here, tulya ninda, right? Shubha shubha. So, whether it is good or bad, or getting evil or getting pleasures. See, the external events cannot touch the inner peace of a sthitaprajna or a muni or a jnani. And again, the nature of a tortoise, yada samharade chayam kurma anganiva sarvasya indriyani indriyartepya tasya prajna pradishtita. Again, tasya prajna pradishtita, where the prajna is, established. Mastery of senses. So how a tortoise act when there is a danger happening in front? It withdraws the limb. It withdraws its limbs, right? So the self-mastery, sense control, not affected by the external circumstances. One whose happiness is not dependent on the external circumstances, whose clarity is not shaken by the emotion, and whose identity is rooted where tasya prajna pradishtita. The man of wisdom. This is what in second chapter Bhagavan says. Such a person is called man of wisdom, who is a muni, who is a, in different ways we can call that man of wisdom, right? Muni, a liberated person, Jivan Muktan, Jnani, Nitya Sannyasi. So now let us see the verse, third chapter, Karma Yogam 39. I think till 38 we covered last week. Avrutam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena analena cha. Avrutam jnanam etena jnaninaha nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena analena cha. So, as we discussed in the beginning, who is the Nitya Vairi for a Jnani? Kama Rupena Kaunteya Dushpurena Analena Cha. So, which is the Nitya Vairi here of a Jnani? Constant enemy, Nitya Vairi meaning constant enemy. Kama Rupena Kaunteya, whose form is desire. Kaunteya, hey Arjuna. So it is very clear, even for a wise person, even for a jnani, there is an eternal enemy. What is this eternal enemy? Kamam. So it happens to everybody. For a jnani also it happens. So then you can imagine what would be the state of a common man. So this desire is the constant eternal enemy. So Bhagavan is insisting all of us to come out of the kamam, egocentric aspect, so called as the mamata buddhi. If you go back to the second chapter, the sthitaprajna lakshana, that wise person has already cracked these egocentric issues, all those mamata, that mamakaram, that is not there. So who is a sthitaprajna? The person of equanimous mind. He is a person who is having samatha. And that sthitaprajna is also a purna. So Bhagavan is insisting us to move away from the mamata to samatha to purnata. From mamata to samatha to purnata. The total fulfillment. So how one can reach this state? That's what Bhagavan is advising us. So now the question is, you must be thinking, Bhagavad Gita started with the Kurukshetra war scenario. The first chapter is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. So now The question is, this kamam is something which is outside of all of us. This is all applicable to us. Where is this real battle? The real battle is within us. The enemy is not outside. In a very simple way, we can say the enemy, so called as the kamam or desire, is the unexamined desire. Be very clear, unexamined desire. So, what is the way to deal with this unexamined desire? This is not suppression. The weapon is not a suppression, obviously. So, what is the way to deal? It is all about having the self-knowledge. It is through self-knowledge one can deal the unexamined desire. Weapon is not suppression. So, through the knowledge, one should get the victory over temptation. Let me use a verse from the Chandogya Upanishad. Atmado belam, Atmado vijnanam, Atmado dhyanam, Atmadas chittam, Atmada sangalpa, Atmado manaha, Atmado vak, Atmado nama, Atmado mantraha, Atmada karmani, Atmada eveda sarvam. What is the meaning? Atmado belam. Belam comes from where? Belam comes from the Atma. Belam comes from the true self. Atmada vijnanam. The wisdom comes from where? From within. Dhyanam comes from where? Atma. Chittam comes from where? From the Atma. Sankalpam comes from where? The Atma. Manas come from where? Please note this. Manas come from the Atma. Atmato manaha. Vak comes from where? Atmataha. Namam comes from where? Atmataha. Mantram comes from where? Atmataha. Karmam comes from where? Atmataha. So it means Atma is the embodiment of all alaukika and laukika guna. Very simple. Atma is the embodiment of every virtue. Well, whether it's balam, vijnanam, dhyanam, chittam, manas, sankalpam, vak, namam, mantram, karmam, everything. In the 5th chapter, in the Sannyasa Yogam, Bhagavan says, Ajnanena avridam jnanam tena muhyandi jandava. So this ajnanam is covered. The jnanam is covered by the ajnanam. The knowledge is covered or caused by the ignorance. And all beings are suffering due to this phenomena. That's it, simple. All beings are suffering due to what? Ajnanena avridam jnanam, because this knowledge is covered by the ignorance. So what one has to do? Remove the layers of ignorance. That's what we have seen in the last few verses. Thumen avriyade vannir yada darsho malena cha. Right. So how the fire is covered by the smoke, though the fire is visible. Similarly, the mirror is covered by the dust, or the embryo covered in the womb. So what is really needed now? See, when you say ajnanam is covering the jnanam, what is that we need? We need alertness. We need discipline. We need self-inquiry. We need to have sadhana in life. And use karma yoga as the technique to purify the mind. But these are not only sufficient. We need grace of the God. Not only that, we should also get exposure to this knowledge. Shastra, Guru. Shastra Kripa, Guru Kripa, Ishvara Kripa, and Atma Kripa. Though we want to have alertness, discipline, we started doing self-inquiry, different sadhanas we started doing. We also understood what is karma yogam, how one should live with prasada buddhi. Not sufficient. Grace is needed. Grace is needed towards getting this knowledge, exposure to this knowledge. Shastra Kripa, Guru Kripa, Ishvara Kripa, Atma Kripa. Is needed for what? To overcome the sensory ignorance, because sensory ignorance is creating attraction in our life, attraction towards the objects, and getting bonded in those. Sensory ignorance, overcome the sensory ignorance, overcome the emotional ignorance. So sensory ignorance is towards creating the attraction towards the objects. Emotional ignorance is forming the attachment on those attractions. And intellectual ignorance is basically, as I mentioned before, the signal jumping. Intellect says that there is a justification. Okay, this time let me go. Nobody is watching. Or it's okay, once in a while let me do. Though the intellect says that what I am doing is wrong. But the intellectual ignorance is creating the justification. So attraction from the sensory ignorance, attachment from the emotional ignorance, justification from the intellectual ignorance, and on the top of that the existential ignorance. Basically, when I say existential ignorance, the false identity that we create in our life. I am this body, I am this mind, I am this intellect, I am this senses, I am so and so, I am a great person, I am having this power, I am having these possessions. So multiple assumed personalities are called as collectively the false identity created due to what? The existential ignorance, where we give lot of identities in the world towards these different objects. So what is happening basically, either two problems we are encountering in life. One is the avarana, so called as the wheeling power, not knowing who truly am I. And the other one is what? The vikshepa, so called as the projection power. Wrongly knowing that I am this body, I am this mind, I am the father, I am the son, I am the grandfather, I am professor, I am lecturer, I am doctor, I am engineer, I am a rich person, I have this legacy. All those things that are called as the projection power, wrongly knowing where you are not knowing your true self. So basically the avaranam and the vikshepa, wheeling power, not knowingness, and the projection power called as vikshepam, wrongly knowing us. Either we don't know or we know wrongly ourselves. That's where Bhagavad Gita helps us to remove these layers of the ignorance. Verse number 40. Indriyani mano buddhi asyaadhishthanamuchyate etair vimohayatyesha jnanamavritya dehinam. Indriyani mana buddhi asya adhishtanamuchyate etai vimohayati esha jnanam avritya dehinam. Indriyani mana buddhi. See, indriya meaning senses, manas meaning mind, buddhi meaning intellect. Asya adhishtanam uchyade is adhishtana meaning the place, where it is located. Uchyade. So what is this referred? Kamam lies in senses, mind, intellect. So called these places are the location for the kamam to reside. Etaihi vimohayadi yesha. With these, vimohayadi deludes, esha, this, jnanam avritya dehinam. So a person's wisdom is covered due to the location, these three locations where kama is placed, and that is how a jiva gets deluded. Vimohayadi yesha. So kamam or kama deludes the person by covering his or her wisdom. This wisdom is there, nothing new here. But what is happening? The senses, indriyani, mano, buddhi, senses, the mind and intellect are said to be the kama's seat. By these it deludes the man by veiling his wisdom, veiling meaning covering or avaranam, as I mentioned before. So the foe, the enemy, the kama hides where? Senses, mind and intellect. These are the hiding spots. Let's see. Senses, what they do? They grasp the pleasurable objects. We have pancha karmendriya, pancha jnanendriya, five karmendriyas. And senses are basically the receptors. Senses get the pleasurable objects. Who decodes this and operate on the top of this sensory information? The mind. The mind goes through the sensory flavors with its own imagination. With its own imagination. Mind applies its own imagination on the top of these pleasurable objects which are given or captured by the senses. With its own sankalpa. Then what happens? Then the intellect decides, yes, to possess this, I need to enjoy this. It is the purpose of my life. So the fire of desires happen at the three layers: Indriyam, Manasa, Buddhi. That is where the human being is deluded due to these three layers. Kama resides at these three layers. Vimohayadi deludes. So senses are the entry gates. Mind is the playing field. Intellect is the decision maker. So one thing we need to understand. The Radha Sankalpa, which we discussed some time back. Atmanam Rethinam Vidhi. Shariram Radhamevadu. Buddhim tu Saradim Vidhi. So who is the Buddhi? Buddhi is the Saradi. So in the case of Arjuna positioned Krishna as the Vijnana Saradi, who is sitting in front of him as the charioteer. Right? Arjuna positions Krishna as the charioteer, who is the Vijnana Saradi, so that intellect drive me. If you see the horses, the five senses, who is controlling those horses? The charioteer, the intellect is controlling the mind. Because the horses can go any direction. So the Vijnana Saradi, intellect is the decision maker. If our intellect is clouded due to the senses and the mind, so then there is no control, because the flood of sensory streams are coming to everybody. It is all unfiltered. We see different things in the life. And coming to the mind through the senses, where mind is a big, play field. A lot of distractions are there. The weight, which I mentioned, the weight and drag, vikshepam, karma vasanas. And kamam will always find out a place to get settled down at these three places. And if the vijnanam, if the intellect is clouded, then all the decisions will be wrong and kamam will take control. That is where kama becomes the eternal enemy. And when the kamam takes the control, the true reality of that person is not known, always, at the plane of body, mind, intellect, senses. I will feel that I am this body, this is my reality. So that is where the jiva gets deluded. So how to come out of this delusion? How or what exercise we have to do? We cannot close our eyes and leave. Cannot stop the senses. So what is really needed? That is where now two important things, shamam and dhamam. Shamam is basically the mastery of mind that will quieten the inner turbulence. Shamam. Dhamam is what? Dhamam is basically mastery of senses, regulating the external inputs. Regulating the external inputs and quietening the inner turbulence. That is where dhamam, shamam, or shamam, dhamam plays important role. So what one has to do? Dhamam is what? Regulate what you see. If you see the Upanishad, Om Bhadram karne vishnunayama deva Bhadram pasye makshabhir yajatra sthirei rangehi stushtuvam sastanovi Gashema deva hidam yadayu Swastina indro vruddhasrava Swastina pusha vishwaveda Swastina astyasho arishtanemi Swastino brahaspardadhadu. So Om Bhadram karne vishnunayama deva. Let me see good things. Meaning what? Let me get regulation in life to see, hear, consume right things. Let me be always blessed by the God to see good things, hear good things, associate with good things, consume good things. This is the first step, dhamam. Second step is what? From the senses, what you get, you have the control to regulate what you want to think, what you want to interpret, what you want to do, how to do, whether to react or respond. This is shama. What is dhamam? Dhamam is basically regulate your senses. Shamam is regulate your mind in terms of what to think, what not to think, what to interpret, what to assume, what to react, what to do, what to do, how to do, whether I should respond or react, should I take an instant decision or a delayed decision. All these are shama. We need both. Without dhamam, without the mastery of senses, what happens is basically the mind will get overstimulated. And without shamam, this knowledge will never get settled. So what you have to do? You have to do this. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharadarshapha papamanam prajahihyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Hey Arjuna, mastering first the senses only will remove this enemy. Therefore, mastering first the senses, slay this sinful destroyer of knowledge and realization. For us to have knowledge and realization in life, you need to master your senses and kill this destroyer. Who is this? This is the kama. Enemy is where? Enemy is inside us. Enemy is inside us. Tasmad. Therefore, Tvam indriyani adau. Very important. Adau meaning what? From the beginning. We must make efforts from the beginning. Adau niyamya, controlling. Paradarshava, hey Arjuna. Papamanam prajahi he enam. So destroy this sinner indeed. Who is the destroyer of knowledge and wisdom? And from where we have to do? Do from the beginning. Adau. So we need to have regulation in life. We need to have discipline in life. For what? For jnana vijnana arjanam. Otherwise what will happen? Jnana vijnana nashanam will happen. Very simple. Let me also bring the 5 sheath Panchagosha Vivegam here. The food sheath, so called as the Annamaya Kosham, the gross body. The vital energy, the Pranamaya Kosham. The mental body, the mental sheath, Manomaya Kosham. Then comes the Vijnanamaya Kosham, the intellect shield. And the Anandamaya Kosham, the bliss shield. Or if you see the Avastatra, daily we encounter these 3 states, Jagrata, Swapna and Sushupti. We all know that our body is changing. Everybody says that, yeah, I have changed a lot 10 years back, 20 years back compared to last year. Every second the body is changing. We are able to witness that. Also see that, our breath is changing, fluctuations in energy, changes in the mind, changes in emotion, changes in anxiety. Also our intellect. Sometime back, our last year, I took a decision to do this. Now I am feeling that decision was wrong. Intellect sometimes deludes and doubts, go to past, go to future. Decisions, wrong decisions, right decisions. But who is watching this? Even the bliss also. I was happy. Extremely my well-being, or we call in the modern way, it's called a subjective well-being, SWB. My subjective well-being was good last year versus this year, or a lot of good moments, pleasant moments. When we say these things, my changes in body to energy fluctuations to the mental fluctuations or mental changes, or the intellectual decisions, changes in intellectual decisions, or changes in the subjective well-being, who is really watching these changes? There is somebody who is remaining same. That's what Bhagavan says in the next verse. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhya param manaha manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu sa. Indriyani paranyahu, indriyani parani ahu indriyebhya param manaha manasaha tu para buddhi ya buddhe parada tu saha. So indriyani paranyahu indriyebhya paramana manasastu parabuddhir yo buddhe paradastu. So that is where this is a very profound verse for all of us to calibrate or recalibrate or revectorize to understand who truly am I. What is the distance that you have with your true self and your desires? So here the verse is very simple. Indriyani paranyahu. The senses are said to be superior to the body compared to the body. If you see, start from the body, senses are more superior because they are subtler, right? They are not gross compared to the body. So they are subtler than the physical body. And Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhya paramana. And the mind is superior to the senses. Manasastu parabuddhi. And compared to the mind and the intellect, the mind is superior to the senses, the intellect is further superior to the mind. And now, yaha buddhe paradastu sa. And there is something which is superior to the intellect. And what is that? That is the Atman. Yaha buddhe parada tu saha. This is the ladder of mastery that we all have to have. Body, senses, mind, intellect. But where is this mind, body, sense, intellect stays? What is the backbone of this? The one which is beyond and behind everything. So the eyes want to see, the ears want to stimulate things, the tongue wants taste, and mind goes with likes, dislikes, imagination, replays. Intellect, that is supposed to be the discriminative faculty that decides, judges, does the rationalization. And if intellect is clouded, right, as we mentioned in the last verse, the desire, the infection of desire will begin. But now there is a big relief for all of us, that Atman, that self which is beyond the intellect, which is beyond the mind, which is beyond our thoughts, which is beyond our emotions, which is beyond everything. Though the ego says I am the doer, enjoyer, etc. This self, that's what I also mentioned, the Upanishadic Vakyam or the statement. Mind is, the Atman is the embodiment of everything. So you may think that you are the senses because you are aware of the senses. And you think you are the mind because you observe the thoughts. You think you are the intellect because you can also notice the decisions, changes in decisions, the right decisions, wrong decisions, what I did previously, what I am doing now. But be mindful, what is that which is knowing all these three? Senses, mind and the intellect. That is this Atman, this is the knower, observer, which is untouched by any of these desires. This kama and all cannot come there because kamam can come up to these three layers. And as long as you are operating in those layers, obviously senses only will control, sensory objects only will control. The moment you know the self, the moment you know the relation between Shariram, Indriyam, Manasa, Buddhi, what is the backbone of everything? That is the Atman. In the deep sleep, what is happening? It is only pure beingness. Non-dual happiness that we all are enjoying, though the ignorance is there. So the hierarchy is what? Body, Indriya, Manasa, Buddhi, Atman. And you are that. Simple. Evam buddhe param buddhva stamstabhya atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Evam buddhe param buddhva. In this way, to the intellect, samstabhya atmanam atmana. Having made steady this mind, atmanam atmana, by the self. Jahi shatrum mahabaho. Jahi shatrum meaning destroy this enemy. Hey mahabaho, hey Arjuna, kamarupam durasadam, in the form of binding desires, which is difficult to understand. So thus knowing of the true self, the Atman, which is superior to intellect, and having made the mind steady, because studying the mind is important. Having made the mind is very important. For what? To attack this desire, the binding desire that comes from the lower planes. It is very difficult to understand. Kama Rupam Durasadam, it is very, very, very difficult to understand. So understand this hierarchy: body, senses, mind, intellect, self. Know that self. This self is beyond the intellect. This self is beyond everything. You stand in this knowledge, Arjuna. You stand in this knowledge not for anything, because the strength is there. Strength is there, mantram is there, vak is there, bhakti is there. Everything is there, and you use that strength to conquer the desire, lust, anger, which is at the lower plane. This is not suppression. This is just to know who truly are you. Don't operate from the lower self, because lower self is mind, ego, complex. You go to the higher self, and higher self is what? This witness consciousness. Use the higher self to grow from the lower. Know your higher nature. Without this self-knowledge, without this discipline, this will become a tension. So know this. You equip this knowledge. You follow the discipline. You use karma yoga as a discipline, so that the natural alignment will happen. The real freedom will start coming when you identify yourself from the body, mind, intellect, sense complex to the self. Idi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Karma Yogo Nama Tridiyodhyayaha.